thrilled to introduce our guest speaker. You actually already met her now, but Mel Gilles is a recycling education and outreach coordinator for the North Carolina Department of Environmental Quality. She is a messaging leader who provides resources to help local governments, schools, businesses, and the recycling industry promote waste reduction and educate their audiences. Last fall, she helped launch the Recycle Right NC, a statewide anti-contamination campaign to clean up recycling. To date, that campaign has reached more than 1 million people and accumulated over 30,000 interactions on Facebook alone. With over 30 years of experience on the front lines of recycling, Mel is a unique expert in making the world of waste diversion efficient, practical, and easy to navigate. Please welcome Mel Gilles.
A little bit about me before you get started. I clearly just like to talk to you and with you, and so we're going to be doing that. The presentation is designed to pretty much answer as many of your questions as I can possibly think that you might ask before you ask them. So hopefully we're going to cover most of the things that you're concerned about as we go through the slides. I started, let's see, when did I become zero waste? Let's talk about that first. I started not participating in a lot of consumer culture and disposable culture when I was 9 years old, way before there was a term like zero waste out there, a few decades before that. I was in a shopping mall with my mom, and I was watching all the people going through the racks. There was a big sale happening. And I promptly had what I later figured out was probably a panic attack. I had to leave the mall. My mom followed me out. She said, "What's going on?" And I said, "What happens to all the stuff when the people don't buy it when it's on sale?" And she said, "Honey, I don't know. I don't know what happens to all this stuff." And I said, "Well, I don't think, I wonder, because it doesn't make any sense. It can't possibly all sell, and there's got to be stuff left over." So I was thinking about where things go and when they're at the end of their life cycle. When I was quite small, it came naturally to me. By the time that I was in high school in Greensboro, North Carolina, I was determined to rebel against my mom and make her mad. I was wearing combat boots and dyeing my hair a funny color, and nothing was working. She wasn't getting angry. And I finally brought home a blue recycling bin. This is in 1986. There wasn't curbside recycling in Greensboro at that point in time. I don't even know where I found a blue recycling bin, to be honest. They were a little hard to come by, but I was determined to make my mom mad. So I brought it and I put it in the kitchen, and she's, her name is Bunny, and she's 5'2". She was a career-long kindergarten teacher. And I was quite tall even then, and I remember her looking up at me and saying, "Mel, you can't make me and you can't make the world." And I thought, well, I can't make her. Bunny's pretty formidable when she says no to something. But I went to school, and at school my teachers were pretty willing. And we put out some bins and started collecting white office paper. And a girlfriend of mine and I would go down the halls, pick it all up, and then take it down to the drop-off recycling site that was in Greensboro at the time. A year later, curbside recycling came to Greensboro, North Carolina, and pretty soon Bunny, my mother, was recycling avidly. When it was convenient and accessible for her, she, like everybody else in our street, started to do it. And now it's a couple of decades later, and clearly curbside recycling is here to stay. Most Americans really consider that to be like an American value. It's something they're pretty invested in at this point. But there's a tremendous amount of confusion about recycling. I started educating, well, when I was 15, 16 years old. I'd been thrift store shopping and trying to figure out ways to avoid waste since I was a kid. And this is clearly a passion of mine. I ended up in the last few years here at the state recycling office. I've been working out for EcoCycle, the oldest and largest recycling nonprofit in the world. Or in the country, located in Boulder, Colorado. I was in corporate outreach there, so I helped big companies like Google and Whole Foods, Lockheed Martin figure out what to do with their waste diversion strategies. So I worked with a lot of local governments, not just in this state, but elsewhere. I've clearly worked for some corporations and then also done a whole bunch of stuff on the grassroots level. So it's always my pleasure to come and see people of all ages who are interested in recycling and talking about that together as a group. We're going to start big picture tonight, kind of wide angle view, and then drill down into the nitty gritty of what can and can't be put into your bin. The stuff I'm going to talk about, yes, we can get into some Cary specific things, and you know, I can help you with that, but I'm not here on behalf of the town of Cary. We spoke with them quite a bit in putting all of this together. They've seen portions of this presentation before, and I am equipped to handle those questions and kind of direct you where you need to go with those. But a lot of what I'm going to be talking about is what's happening on the statewide level and the national and global level too, okay? So let's just start right off the bat with some things that people usually come into the rooms thinking about, and some things maybe that aren't entirely correct about recycling. So we've got some recycling myths. The first one is that recycling is going to save us, and it might be strange to hear a recycling educator sit here and tell you that that's not true, but I'm telling you right now, that's not true. Recycling is not the be-all to end-all. It is just one of the R's. We have other things like reduce and reuse and repair, refuse. Those are all great options, and recycling is wonderful, but it's several R's down the line, and I want you to think about all those other R's before you get to the recycling bin, okay? And we'll talk more about that as we go. Recycling is free or profitable. So in our country, in the past, recycling has been something that local governments and larger waste management companies have been making a profit off of. That's been great. At the very least, we've always been breaking even on our recycling endeavors in this country. But global markets have changed, and we do not expect to see recycling be profitable or free, probably again anytime soon. So it's important to sort of disabuse ourselves of the notion that recycling is free or profitable. Recycling actually has a cost associated with it, as all of our public utilities do. We pay for trash service, we pay for electricity, we pay for water. There's no reason in the world why we shouldn't also be paying for recycling. But before, when the recycling markets were doing great, we didn't have to. Now we do, and it's about the same cost as hauling stuff off to the landfill at the present moment, maybe just a little bit higher. Already tonight, and talking to a few of you before the presentation started, and even with some of your questions, there's a myth that we're doing it all right, or we're doing it all wrong with recycling. And you know, many things that I'm going to say to you tonight don't just apply to recycling, they apply to life. So if you're thinking in any way, shape, or form that anything that you're doing is all right or all wrong, I am here to tell you that that is not true, and that certainly applies to recycling. Contamination needs to be addressed, right? Contamination is when we put the wrong things in the bin. And we're doing some things right and some things wrong, and we can always get better as we move forward together. Another great recycling myth is that it's confusing and that it's complicated. It is neither one of those things. Recycling is actually quite simple, and there are only 9 things that we can reliably recycle, and we're going to talk about those tonight. The shame is that we have not done a good job of educating the public consistently about what can and can't be recycled. And I can tell you one good reason why. For the time when recycling was profitable, it wasn't necessary to talk to the public very much about what not to put into the bin, because we were getting so much good stuff that was making a profit that it didn't matter too much if you guys were putting the wrong things in there. But about 5 years ago, when the global markets around recycling started to change, my phone started ringing off the hook. No one had wanted to talk to a recycling educator before about 5 years ago, when recycling became a little bit less profitable. Now, suddenly, people like you want me to come talk to you. That wasn't the case until very, very recently. So just keep in mind that recycling is not complicated or confusing, but the public information out there about it hasn't been very unified, and that information has been quite confusing. We'll go over it tonight, and hopefully it'll become a lot more simple for you. Another big myth is that recycling is very different from place to place. The truth is, there are more similarities than differences between recycling programs and what one local government and the next town over can take. And the campaign that we designed at the state office, the Recycle Right MC campaign, focuses on those similarities. We do address the differences, but we are trying more and more to let the public know that the 9 things that can be reliably recycled can be reliably recycled not just in this town or the next town over or in the state of North Carolina, but also all across America and in general worldwide. All right, here we go. So, used to be in industry, the way things were manufactured was a one-way street, okay? One-way street from extraction to disposal. So you would extract your raw materials, you would manufacture the product that you needed to produce, you would distribute that product, run some trucks to get it where it needed to go. Somebody, the consumer, would buy it and eat it or wear it or consume it in some way, and then you would have something left over at the end, a plastic bag or whatever, that would get disposed of in a hole in the ground. That's it, one-way street from a hole in the ground with extraction to a hole in the ground with disposal with the waste, okay? Now, that worked out fine for industry, for our world, everybody, until pretty recently, last 20 years, industry started figuring out this was not a good model. We are going to have close to 9 billion people on this planet by the year 2025. When we had less people, it wasn't so important to be conserving our natural resources, but it is very important now. And in fact, we're outpacing the ability of the world to produce enough resources to make enough product for us to consume by 2 worlds. So even if we had another world with all of the same resources that we have on this one, it wouldn't be enough to cover the consumption that we're doing right now, okay? So we had to change our model. And this is now what we're calling the circular economy model. So we're not going a one-way street anymore from extraction to disposal. Instead, we're trying to recycle and consume a little bit less and redesign our products and remanufacture things so that the whole thing goes in a circle. And sometimes you have to dispose of a little bit of waste, but as much as possible of that waste, you're going to keep in the stream and recycle it or reduce it or reuse it in some way so that you can keep on remanufacturing your items within the circular economy. Now, you can see that by refusing, reducing, reusing, repairing, the other R's that I was talking about before, you can also reduce your consumption of resources. Either you can reduce some distribution cost, or you can reduce how much it's going to take to extract something. So those other R's, refusing, reducing, reusing, and repairing, are really important. Recycling, as I said, is just that moment where you're standing at the bin trying to figure out what to do with the thing in your hand that's left over after you've consumed whatever, your Big Mac or your milkshake or whatever, right? You're standing there with your disposable cup. Well, ideally, what I want you to do is I want you to be standing there before you buy the milkshake in the disposable cup and think, when I'm done with this, I'm going to have a cup in my hand and I don't know where it goes. Right? And then I want you to figure out, Google it, or remember this presentation, where that cup goes, which is the trash. And then I want you to say, you know what, next time when I need my milkshake, I'm bringing my own cup. I'm not going to take that disposable cup anymore. Or if I do, I'm going to make some other choices in my life to offset that decision, okay? So again, reduce, refuse, reuse, repair, these are all really important things. And that moment when you're standing at the bin not knowing what to do with the thing in your hand, I just don't want you to go through that anymore. I want you to do that way before you're at the moment where you've got a piece of waste in your hand. So, what's your role in the circular economy? I just got ahead of myself and covered some of this. Refuse, reduce, reuse, repurpose, repair, all of those things before you're recycling and recovering resources. Think through each stage before purchasing. Consider the packaging. And recycle it right. So if you do have something that can be recycled, know that when you purchase that item. And if you've got something in your hand that you're not sure can be recycled, don't buy the thing, okay? Now, here's a good question. So percentages of what is actually in the common household waste bin, okay? In general, about 32% of what people are throwing away is recyclable. Somewhere between 35% and 55% is compostable. And then another like 29-30% is straight up garbage, trash, belongs in the landfill. So what that means is if you're recycling, about 30% of what you used to be throwing away can be going to being reused in the recycling structure to remanufacture product, okay, which is awesome. But even more important, and this is the big takeaway from tonight, I want you to really start thinking about food waste and the potential of composting. If you're not doing it already, you should be. Because then, if you compost, you're going to reduce what you're throwing away by about 50% for most households. That's going to be way more reduction in waste than recycling is, like an additional 15 to 20% potentially. So recycling's awesome, and of course I don't want you to stop doing it, but I really want you to start thinking about compost if you're not already. Talk to your municipality about bringing it on curbside if you can. It's super important, and I know that this area is definitely looking at that. The more citizens that are showing interest in that, the more likely that is to come online. And I'm also here to tell you that composting right now is exactly like recycling was in 1986 when my mother, Bunny Gilles, was standing and looking at me and telling me I couldn't make her and I couldn't make the world. That was how recycling was then, and now most of us recycle, right? Compost is the same way. Our world, with this many people on it, cannot stand to keep on producing that much waste and having it just sit in the landfill where it doesn't break down. We have to, as part of a municipal solid waste strategy, learn how to compost community-wide, statewide, nationally. And that sort of infrastructure is coming online as we speak right now. Durham is going to be piloting their first curbside compost program very shortly, and you're going to see very many other municipalities across the state do that over the next 10 years. So why recycle? I hope I'm preaching to the converted here at this point, and you don't even have to really go over this stuff, but here it is, conserve natural resources. It certainly saves energy, it reduces greenhouse gas emissions, it decreases pollution, it saves landfill space, it avoids disposal costs, and it provides jobs. Plenty of reasons to keep recycling, even when the global markets aren't necessarily supporting it. Clearly, this is good for the overall whole and part of a good, strong municipal solid waste strategy. So, if you're putting all your food waste into the garbage can, it's going to the landfill and it's just getting mummified. It's just sitting there and it's not breaking down. That's it. If we decide we're going to divert that and put it into compost, either in the backyard or curbside instead, boom, we're reducing landfill space right there. Same thing with the recycling. If we take that out of the landfill and then recycle it, make new materials out of that, so much better overall for the whole. So why should you be a good recycler? Well, landfills are bad, which we just went over, right? People on the line. There are folks there who are actually sorting through whatever you send to them. And if you sent them stuff that isn't supposed to be in the recycling, that means that they're sitting there fixing your mistakes. So you technically are the first sorter. And if you are sorting correctly, then you're making their lives so much easier. And this applies to, like, people ask me all the time, how clean should the item be when I put it in the recycling bin? Think about a person on the line. If you were somebody who was sorting the recycling, would you want it to be, that yogurt container to be smelly and gross and caked in the old yogurt? No. That's not a nice work environment, right? So get it as clean as you can. The cleaner, the better. And that's just, I don't want you obsessing over it, but if you can give it a rinse and then put it into your bin, that's the way to go. Or give your peanut butter jar to your dog to lick ahead of time. That's another nice strategy to help the people on the line too. Oh, and efficiency, of course. Everything that I just said is better for the efficiency of the recycling sorting center. So what's a contaminant? We talk a lot about anti-contamination or contamination being high in the recycling. Contamination means when the wrong thing has gone in the bin and it's basically turning whatever is in the recycling into a piece of trash. Now, contaminants are hard on the people, as I just talked about, right? People who are sorting on the line. Hard on the process, right? Or hard on the price. Plastic bag would be a great example of a contaminant in the single stream curbside recycling. Okay, and it hits all three of these. So when a plastic bag, even the bag that you might be bagging your recycling in, don't do it anymore, okay? Plastic bags, when they go into your single stream recycling, they get wrapped around the gears of the recycling machinery, all right? What has to happen is every 3 hours for 30 minutes, someone from the recycling facility or a couple of people have to go up into the recycling gears, which are huge, they're massive, with hooks, and pull all of the plastic bags out. So that's hard on the people. It's clearly hard on the process, right? And say that plastic bag doesn't get caught in the gears and it actually goes through, it's gonna get sorted as paper. It's gonna get flattened and perceived by the machines as paper, and then that's gonna go into the paper bale, and then that's gonna bring down the price per bale of the paper, okay? So a plastic bag is like offender number one in the single stream recycling. If you don't remember anything else from anything that I've said today besides that you were gonna have your dog lick your peanut butter jar, also remember that plastic bags are the number one thing that we don't wanna see in the recycling anymore, okay? And remember that plastic bag is a great example of what a contaminant is. Now, a contaminant doesn't have to be hard on the people and the process and the prices, all three of those things to be a contaminant. It just has to hit one, okay? Now, what's wish cycling? You hear us talk a little bit about that these days. Wish cycling is when you're standing there at the bin with your disposable cup and you're like, you know what? I know it probably isn't going to get recycled, but I hope it does. Boom, and you put it in the recycling bin. Wish cycling is also when you're standing there with this piece of plastic. And you're pretty sure that it's not a plastic bottle, tub, jug, or jar, but it kind of might be a bottle, maybe, and then you put it in there again, hoping that it's going to get recycled the right way, all right? So wish cycling is a huge problem. It's probably one of the biggest contaminant producers that we've got. And it's not because anybody in my mind or in my experience is trying to do the wrong thing or being malicious or not wanting to. In fact, what I find is the majority of the American public loves to hear me talk about this stuff and really is willing to do it the right way, actually desperate for the information, right? So wish cycling is more, from my perspective, kind of hopeful. It's like this optimistic part of every human in this country who just really wants everything to be recyclable. But the answer is no, everything is not recyclable, and so we have to stop thinking that way. And then we do have to use that kind of innate goodness and optimism that people have, the willingness to do good, and then capitalize on it by educating the right way. So single stream recycling gave us really high participation, meaning my mother, that story from the beginning when she was like, can't make me, can't make the world, that was before somebody gave her a curbside bin to fill up, right? Then they gave her that, right? And she was like, I'll do it. That sounds fantastic. I'm all about curbside recycling. Whereas a year before, couldn't even think about it. So single stream, which is when we put all of those things that can be recycled into the one bin and then it gets collected and taken away, was an excellent thing because it really increased participation of people like my mother. Really awesome. But we didn't do a whole lot of good education when we brought in single stream and curbside recycling, right? And so those two things together resulted in really high contamination and a whole lot of wishful recyclers. Also, we had these booming overseas markets that I've been talking about that were giving us a good profit on our plastics and metal and cans and paper. And that also led to sort of this out of sight, out of mind thing. It was okay if there was some contamination in the bin because things were profitable at the time, right? So that led to some more wishful recycling. We also had proliferation of plastics. So within the last 10 years, we suddenly saw, like there was a time, right, when you would go to buy your broccoli and it wasn't all wrapped up in a plastic baggie. And like now, you know, you go to look at your broccoli and it's kind of hard to find the broccoli that doesn't come in the plastic bag, right? Especially at some grocery store chains. That wasn't the case just 10 years ago. But fracking, natural gas, a whole lot of that, very, very cheap, made it very, very affordable to produce a lot of new plastic packaging that hadn't been produced before. So this proliferation of plastics that were low-grade plastics that weren't exactly recyclable, not even close, also led to the wishful recycling problem that we have today. Now, this might not be that popular for me to say here, but I've already talked it over with Leah Dargan about how the zero waste movement actually added to a lot of wishful recycling too. I don't know if you are on social media. Most of us are. Maybe you're on Instagram, maybe you're on Facebook, maybe you've seen like a parent with their jar, their mason jar, and like I have a family of 15 and we only produce this much trash in the last year, or actually the last 6 months. And that's adorable and exciting and true for some people, but the majority of us cannot aspire to only produce that much if we're actually recycling correctly. Now, so what happened was a lot of people would see that mason jar in that family, and they would think, oh, I want to do that too. I'm going to recycle everything. If it has a recycling symbol on the bottom, I'm putting it in my single stream bin. And they thought they were doing the right thing, right? All of us, I think, were very inspired and thought that this was a wonderful thing to do. It is, as long as you know that I'm only going to put those 9 items that are recyclable in the bin, but not all these other things that I wish were things that could be recycled, okay? The other thing I'm going to say, this is a scary thing for a recycling educator to say, is when in doubt, throw it out. I would rather you tossed something that you weren't sure was recyclable than you put it into the bin hoping that it was. Yeah, resounding silence and some nods that are like in acceptance. Yes, I'm accepting what she just said. Yeah. So yeah, just think about that. I would rather see you toss it if you're not sure, okay? Get the right answer if you can. You know, another good way to put this is, when in doubt, give us a shout. You know, get in touch, find out, get the right information from your local government, or get the information from us. You can find it. It's not too hard, and hopefully after tonight you're going to know what is and isn't. And the next time that you're not sure, you'll toss it, or you'll get somebody to tell you whether or not it is something you can put in there. So why is it so confusing? Why has it been so confusing? If we haven't already covered this enough, let's talk about the 3 really good reasons. Recycling is not a standardized industry. So there was no decision across this country, everybody's going to recycle, we're all going to recycle at the same time. That's not what happened. Local governments decided one at a time, based on citizen participation and excitement, whether or not they were going to start a recycling program. In Boulder, Colorado, it started in the early 70s because a bunch of hippies had a bus, I'm not kidding you, and decided to go door to door and pick up the recycling from their neighbors, okay? In Greensboro, North Carolina, one girl, myself, was mad at her mom, and so then we had a recycling program at a high school, and then there was a drop-off site, and then all sorts of stuff happened, and then suddenly a year and a half later there was curbside, and the seniors were getting involved. Like, this happened in these little one-off ways all over the country in the late 60s, through the 70s, and into the early 80s. But there was never a national policy for infrastructure and recycling, money, grant money, all those things, nothing like that. So not a standardized industry. Technology has constantly changed. So who in the room remembers when you would get your bill and it had like a little plastic window in it, and you wanted to recycle that envelope, so you had to tear out the plastic in the window, right? Some of you are probably still doing that. Yeah, right. You don't have to do that anymore, all right? So the rules keep changing, especially for those of us who have been recycling for a couple of 3 decades, like my old self. So, and that's been changing because the technology keeps improving. Now, one good thing to note, it gets easier as we go, right? So we used to have to take out that plastic on the bill envelope, but now we don't have to. The rules are constantly getting simpler, not harder, so there's that. The other thing is, we've already talked about this a little bit, is that markets keep changing. So as the markets change, sometimes what we can recycle changes. But the things we're going to talk about tonight that are reliably recyclable have always pretty much been the things that we recycle, okay? So the ones that I'm going to be speaking about this evening and the ones that we can pretty much depend on as being the things that can be recycled for the foreseeable future. Now, this is kind of a little bit of repetition, but you know, what is traditionally decided whether or not something is recyclable is where you are, so what your local community is taking, the technology, what the machines can sort, and then also what the markets can support, what commodities actually have value at that given point in time. Is there a buyer? Is something that's really important to whether or not something is recyclable, all right? But now, markets are really dominating this. Technology can only go so far in helping us with the sorting and all of this, and many recycling centers have the same technology at this point. Almost all of them are running with the same basic machinery, the same basic plan, okay? So the technology is starting to even out, and then what you can recycle locally is being determined by global markets, right? And so it used to be that like Cary might decide I'm going to add this thing in, or you know, we'd like to bring in cartons next year, or we're going to decide to do this a little bit differently. That's changing now because the global markets are dominating all of the decisions. And this slide is going to show you why. So these are just a few of the headlines from the last year about recycling that I'm sure some of you saw or you heard on NPR or whatever other news outlet that you're listening to. Things like, is this the end of recycling? Who killed recycling? Why America's recycling industry is in the dumps? I mean, this is, and all of this with China and the banning of imports. So these have been the news story, that recycling is dead, it's over, la 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 la. I am here to tell you, none of that is the full truth, okay? I would not be standing here today having this conversation with you if recycling was dead and gone. That's not where we're at. Now, what we did at the state is, we were hearing from all the local governments, we don't even know what to tell our people because they're reading these headlines and everybody's really upset now and confused. And what do you think is going on? And we said, well, we're going to find out. Let's see if recycling's really actually over. So, you know, we got the bad press around recycling, we got these confusing guidelines and public education tools from the municipalities, we've got limited resources to fight back, so it's not a standardized industry. We've got misinformed citizens, press, and public officials, and we've got contamination costs rising and really affecting how profitable recycling is. So we decided we would go to every single material recovery facility in the state. Now, the material recovery facilities are the places where your recycling is sent. So you collect it curbside or at your drop-off center, and then the stuff goes to your material recovery facility, all right? There's 14 of them in North Carolina. We talked to them all, and guess what we found out? We found out we have these areas that we're calling MRF sheds. We made this map. It's on the DEQ website. And you can go to the map and you can click on it and you can see where your recycling is going. So you've got, you know, a blue area, that's Sunoco. You've got, I think the green area is waste management. You've got all these different ones and you can see, oh, all the recycling for this region is going to this material recovery facility, which means whatever that material recovery facility is saying that they take or don't take is what that whole area is actually recycling. That's it. Now, we then kind of drilled down even further. We started comparing the lists. And what we found out is for 7 of them, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of the recycling facilities out of 4, there were no differences in what they were taking. It's exactly the same. 2 of the material recovery facilities aren't taking glass. Okay, so that was their difference. And then we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of the material recovery facilities that were telling us, well, we've got a few little tiny differences from those larger guidelines, but they're really tiny. Like, we're not putting aerosol cans on the no list, or we're not taking cartons at our facility. That's it. So what does that mean? Well, it means that the majority of the material recovery facilities in the state of North Carolina are accepting the same stuff. Now, what does this mean for you guys here locally? Here's the differences here, a whole slide dedicated, and some of you might want to take out your camera, it's already happening, and take a photo. Yeah. So, the standard accepted materials list is the material list that we came up with for the entire state of North Carolina, and Wake County Waste Management's list is exactly the same as that list that's shared with the other 7 material recovery facilities in the state that all collect the same stuff. Now, there are small differences, and here they are. Raleigh and Apex work with Sunoco. Wake County works with Waste Management. Sunoco is taking clamshells and chip cans because they actually produce clamshells and chip cans. So they're one of the few material recovery facilities in the state, actually the only one, that collects stuff that they actually then produce into new chip cans and clamshells, if that makes sense. So they take those 2 things. Cary works with Waste Management, and they don't take cartons and they don't take pizza boxes, but they do allow lids. That's it. Those are the big differences. So everything else that we're going to go over today is the stuff that we have in common. These are the only differences that you guys have in this area. It's not a lot, is what I'm getting at. All right, so here we are, recycling basics. What we got? The basics: plastic bottles, tubs, jugs, and jars. That's it. If it isn't a plastic bottle, tub, jug, or jar, and it's made of plastic, do not put it in your recycling bin. Yeah. Metal, and we'll talk more about plastics in a second. Metal pans. That's steel and aluminum. Glass bottles and jars. Most places, again, remember there's 2 MRFs in the state, 2 material recovery facilities that don't take glass right now, right? But most places do. And paper and cardboard. And we'll talk specifically about what paper, what cardboard, what kind of jars, those things as we move forward here. So, with these 4 main categories, and actually I'm going to go back. When I keep on saying 9 items, these are the 9 items. Those are the 9 items that can be reliably recycled, all right? Now, when we get into the specifics around plastic, what you need to know is that at the material recovery facility, and if you ever get a chance to go to Sunoco and see how they do it, or Waste Management and see how they do it, go take a tour of your MRF. Everything I'm telling you right now tonight, you can take it on faith from me because I've been in this business for a while and because I look very respectable and my hair is a funny color, and that it's all fine and well to like believe that this lady who just came off the street who's standing up here is an expert. But if you go to the MRF, if you go to your material recovery facility and you see how they do it there, it is going to blow your mind. And all of it, all the things that I'm telling you right now that might sound kind of arbitrary, will totally make sense. It'll completely fall into place, okay? But the machines sort according to shape and size. So they recognize consistent shapes, which is why you shouldn't flatten things, because then they don't know that's a can anymore. It appears as flat, so it looks like paper to a machine, okay? We'll talk more about that too. So they need to recognize the shape of an item, and then the size of an item is very important. In general, you don't want something smaller than a business card in your recycling, nor do you want it to be bigger than a jug. That's it. Okay? So, with plastic bottles, tubs, jugs, and jars, anything else, lids, straws, single-use disposable cups, 6-pack rings, all those pouches, none of that is recyclable in your curbside recycling. Okay? Metal, cans, aluminum, steel. We don't want to see ladders, we don't want to see hangers, we don't want to see pots and pans in our curbside recycling. Right? We want to see the metal cans because that's the thing that the machine recognizes. Glass, bottles, and jars, all good, no problem. But we don't want to see things like mirrors and windows and glassware, not only because they're the wrong shape, but also because those things, those kinds of glass melt at a different temperature than the glass from your jars and the glass from your bottles. And so when the glass goes to get recycled, you're working with glasses that are melting at different temperatures, which doesn't make a consistent product. And then for paper, we want paper and in general cartons and cardboard, okay? But not here, not in Cary, the cartons. No small paper pieces in packaging or shredded paper, and no, nothing like that sweet and low packet. Not just because it's smaller than a business card, but does anybody have another reason why the sweet and low packet wouldn't go in the paper recycling? Anybody got a guess? Yeah, good. Well, so flat's not a problem with paper. Paper, it gets sorted as flat items, and that's good, but it's a good guess, and it means you were listening to what I was saying a moment ago about other things getting flat. Yeah?
Sugar in it?
Well, yes, okay, great. So it can sometimes have grainy sugar in it, which is not fantastic, but also it's coated with plastic. Okay, so that the paper on the inside has a little plastic lining to keep that sweet and low all nice and fresh and from getting wet, right? And we don't want things that are made of 2 things like that. Yeah. Yes, great, and thank you for that. And this is a great time to answer this question. So cartons are the only exception to the rule that I just stated, that we don't want stuff in the recycling bin that's made out of multiple materials. The reason cartons are an exception to that is because the Carton Council, there's such a thing, got together and said, you know what, we're going to make it possible for this item to be recycled. We're going to do something called extended producer responsibility. We make the cartons, and therefore we're going to be the end market for the cartons too, to come back so that they can become new cartons or something else. That's an exception to the rule. You're going to see more and more extended producer responsibility. So these things that are hard to recycle because they're made out of multiple things, we're going to see more and more industry stepping up and taking responsibility for that. But right now, cartons are one of the few things that's happening with. Great question. Yeah?
For paperboard, in that kind of vein of conversation.
Yeah.
I get caught on, it feels a little waxy, it feels like it has some plastic. Is there a good litmus test for figuring out what is paperboard?
I mean, most paperboard is fine, is what I'm here to tell you. So, you know, very rarely is that lined with something that's going to keep it from, most of the time it's fine. It's not actually lined with anything. So I wouldn't, yeah.
Frozen vegetable box?
Frozen?
Frozen vegetable.
So frozen's a different story. Frozen boxes aren't actual paperboard. They're always lined with some sort of plastic on the inside. So frozen food boxes I'd put in a whole other category, which is generally unrecyclable.
I was thinking about English muffins. Thomas was English muffins in particular, are very similar too,
I see.
because it has that.
You know what, the best thing I could say to you, I mean, besides the frozen food box rule, is tear it. When you tear it, if you see plastic coming off it, then you know that it's lined with the plastic.
Otherwise, it might just be a waxy product that could be.
You know what, this is one of those things where we're kind of drilling down into the unknowable, and so I'm going to go to my stock answer, which is when in doubt, throw it out. If it's not reliably recyclable, then don't do it. Yep. All right, we're going to keep going. Let's see. To this. So what are some things we always know should go not into your curbside recycling? Aerosol cans are a fire hazard at the recycling facility. We do not want them in the curbside recycling. If they're empty, they can go into the trash can. If they've got something in them, you're going to take them to your hazardous materials drop-off site. Okay? Ceramic items, not recyclable. Nothing we can do with them. Those pumps and tubes, multiple materials, metal, plastic, all sorts of stuff, no good. Take them, put them in the trash can, or reuse that pump, right? No receipts. Those aren't really made out of paper. They're just not made out of paper. That's all there is to it. So that's not paper that can become another piece of white office paper, which is what a lot of the paper that goes into the recycling bin becomes. Styrofoam ain't recyclable. I hope you got the memo. And if you're going someplace that is still using it, please encourage them to stop. There are a few grocery store outlets around the southeast that will take styrofoam back. Publix is one of them, but it's not something that we can put into our curbside recycling bins. And then tanglers, just like those plastic bags, hoses, ropes, string lights from Christmas, all that stuff, please don't put them in the recycling, okay? They get caught up around the gears of the machinery. Let's see, here's some non-curbside recyclables. So most of the stuff I'm talking about tonight is stuff that you put in your curbside bin, right? Your single stream curbside bin, or you take to your drop-off site. This stuff you can also take to special outlets. Appliances, which we were talking about a few moments ago, generally can go to a convenience center, to a drop-off site. Electronics, also, often can go to a convenience center or drop-off site. Clothing and textiles, please take them to a thrift store, or sometimes your convenience center will have a drop-off for them. Sometimes you'll see those drop-offs in parking lots as well, maybe at the grocery store or wherever. Hazardous waste, there's a statewide number that you can call, which is here, for other drop-off locations, or you can sometimes take it to convenience center. You can call them and find out if they'll take it, or if they have a hazardous materials place for stuff. Medical waste needs to go to your local public health department. You need to give them a call and find out where the disposal place is for that. Plastic bags and wrap generally can go to the front of your grocery store. People ask me all the time, are they really recycling that stuff? Yes. You guys know the decking that is not wood, that's made out of plastic composite? Maybe your own deck is made out of that. There's a big company named Trex who makes a whole lot of it. A lot of that plastic wrap, bubble wrap, plastic bags that you take to the front of your grocery stores is going to get baled and then sent off to a place like that to make decking or something similar, patio furniture, all sorts of stuff. Paper towels and napkins, do not, and Kleenex, your dirty Kleenex. My mother-in-law, y'all would not believe, every time she comes, she's putting that stuff in there. We did the Recycle Right campaign in the fall, and one of our social media posts is about the napkins, Kleenex, and paper, the napkins, Kleenex, and paper towels. And my mother-in-law liked it, and I said, I have won the day. Now she knows. And she called me up the next day, and she said, I'll never put another Kleenex in your recycling bin. I'm so sorry. I was never going to correct her. She's a dear. But there you have it. Please put those, if you have compost them, and if not, they go in the trash. That paper is too thin and dirty for it to come back as another piece of paper, okay? And then food waste. We don't want food waste in the recycling cart. We want it to go to the compost or send it to landfill if you must, okay? Or don't produce it by shopping a little bit better and thinking ahead about your meals. So here's what I would say. The way that recycling and waste diversion happens in this country is by concerned citizens getting together and making stuff happen. Because it's not a standardized industry, right? Now, that's awesome. That's been working out in our favor for a few decades. What we need at this point in time, I was just talking to folks who are working on compost here in Cary, 340 Waste recently about all this. What we need is all the citizen activist groups getting together and listening to one another and cross-sharing information as quickly as they find it. We cannot force anyone to access our materials and use them. We make it available, and then anybody who wants to call me up or wants to go to the website or wants to go look at our Facebook page is more than welcome to utilize that stuff, and I'd be happy to talk to the people there if they want to. But we only go where people ask us to go. We don't make anybody do anything, okay? Nothing's mandated. So encourage them to come my direction, get my card from me before the end of the evening, and I will gladly chat with anyone, all right? But I have to take the call in order to go help them, right? I don't go out seeking them. All right, here's the whole thing on the caps and the lids, right? So here's our slide about these weird ones. So caps screw on, lids pop off, okay? If it screws on, keep it with its container. In general, we say if the lid pops off, it's going to get separated from its container in the recycling. It's going to be perceived as paper because it's flat, right? That's no good for the bales. Now, Cary says it's okay to include the lids. So go ahead and do what Cary says, right? And I'm letting you know that on the recovery facility side of things, when that recycling gets to the MRF, where this recycling is sorted, that lid doesn't stand a chance. It's being actually recycled. It's going to get sorted as paper. They're going to have to pull it out of the paper bale. It's going to go to the landfill. That's the practical answer. So they're taking it, but it's probably not being recycled at the material recovery. Yeah, in general, here's what I would say. The glass jar and the metal lid should not go in together. When we're talking about caps staying with its container, it's if it's the same material, so plastic on plastic. If they're different, just put the glass jar in the bin, and you can take a risk here with that metal lid and put it in the bin because there's a magnet for the metal. I wouldn't say this to everybody in general if I was educating a huge room of people because it's too confusing, but I get that you guys are pretty high level and I think you understand what I'm saying here. Okay, you got me. Recycling clean pizza boxes. You can if they're clean. How often are they clean? Not very often. Now, right, that is the answer. So the public hates to hear that the pizza box can't be recycled. So we say, well, if it's clean, you can recycle it. It's cardboard. Cary has said that they've spoken with Waste Management. Waste Management has told them they no longer want pizza boxes. They're saying that because the majority of the pizza boxes that Waste Management is getting are contaminated. So, if you want to turn in the completely clean pizza box to your recycling, you can do it. If you want to pull the lid off because it's cardboard and it's clean, you can do it, and the likelihood is that it's going to be recycled. But the official policy for this area is not to take any pizza boxes because the majority of them are covered in food waste. And they're greasy, even if they don't have sauce and cheese on them. That grease is impossible to get out of the cardboard. That cardboard can't come back as another piece of cardboard, okay? Paper egg cartons, yes, those can be recycled. Styrofoam and plastic egg cartons, no, they can't. Okay, so make a good consumer choice here. This is where those other R's that I was talking about before really come in handy. So you're standing there and you're deciding which eggs to buy. You decide to buy the ones in the paper carton. Or if you buy the ones that are in styrofoam and plastic cartons and you make sure those get to a farmer and then those goes to the farmer's market, right? Like find something to do with them if you're going to buy the plastic or the styrofoam ones. Don't put them in your recycling bin, and if you have to dispose of them, put them in the trash where they belong. And then aluminum foil. So if it's clean, and again, how often is aluminum foil clean after you've used it? Not very often, especially if you're like me, you're reusing and reusing that piece of aluminum foil. That's what I do. So that's great, but if it happens to be a really clean piece of aluminum foil, then you can ball it up, right? If you ball it up into a 2-inch ball or bigger, the likelihood is it's not going to get flattened by the machines and perceived as paper, okay? So if it's a nice dense ball of aluminum foil and it's clean aluminum foil, you can put that in the recycling bin. But otherwise, if it's dirty aluminum foil, just rinse and reuse it or put it in the trash where it belongs. Or maybe you just think about not using so much aluminum foil, which is what we do in my household. Confusing language. So we've thrown around some of these concepts already tonight. We've been pretty loose about it. So here, let's go ahead and talk about it. Clamshells confuse the heck out of people who aren't in the industry, and why we ever started calling them that, I just don't know, but there you have it. Clamshells are the berry containers. They open like this, so it's like a clamshell, right? Some people, when I talk about this, think I'm talking about actual clamshells, like yeah, right. And there was actually, I think, like an oyster shell recycling program for some areas in North Carolina for a long time. Yes, I'm getting some nods. So the clamshell thing can confuse people. And so this slide is just about the language is confusing, and we're trying to correct some of that right here. So, and again, clamshells are not recyclable curbside here. They are recyclable curbside for those who have Sunoco as their material recovery facility. Aseptic cartons, somebody threw around that language earlier. We're just talking about milk cartons, juice boxes, that kind of stuff when you see something that says aseptic cartons. Gable top cartons, same thing. Aseptic cartons can also be broth cartons, things like that. Rigid plastics. Some people will talk about those. Used to be some recycling programs that tell you could throw your lawn chairs into the curbside recycling. That they were, at that point in time, recycling rigid plastics for a hot minute. There was a market for that. Rigid plastics are not recyclable in your curbside anywhere that I know of right now in this state, okay? You may have an occasional drop-off site that takes them. All right, so here's some little other things. Rinse it, we talked about this before. Think about the people on the line. And the cleaner, whatever it is that you're putting in the bin, the more pristine it is, the higher the value, the better it is for the market. So that's a nice thing to do too. Multiple materials we already chatted about. So if it's made of multiple things, probably not recyclable. Plastic codes, we've hinted at this, but we didn't talk about it completely yet. Gosh darn it, that recycling symbol, it doesn't mean something's recyclable. And I'll just say it again, that recycling symbol doesn't mean that something's recyclable. And I'll say it one more time, it just doesn't mean much. And so if you turn something up down and you're looking at what's on the bottom, you just know you're in trouble. At that moment, you know the jig is up, all right? Remember, plastic bottles, tubs, jugs, and jars. If it isn't that shape, it is probably not recyclable, and I don't care what that code says on the bottom. That was put on there for folks in the industry so that I could sort my recyclables into bales of different kinds of plastics, and the numbers indicate what kind of plastic that thing is, and then I could call up somebody in China and say, I got a bale of number 4s, are you buying? Right? And they could say, yeah, for this much, and I could say, fantastic, and that was it. Instead, what happened is we all saw the symbol, and somebody thought it looked really good on a billboard, and somebody else put it on a t-shirt, and then it was on bumper stickers, and then it was on everything that we can imagine. There was really no, again, standardization within the industry on this, and now everybody's claiming everything they're putting out there is recyclable, right? So just ignore that little symbol, and remember plastic bottles, tubs, jugs, and jars, okay? Flatten things we already talked about, and the front row is really getting that part, that we don't want to flatten the container, right? Because then it'll get perceived as paper. Cups. Once I went and did this presentation, and I did not get past the cups. I made the mistake of talking about cups at the beginning on the first slide. Wrong, never did that again. I had 70 people in the room. It was a Chamber of Commerce. It was in Boulder, Colorado, which is supposed to be like one of the most progressive places in the universe. And like the room just flipped out. They saw this cup slide and like we just spent the next hour with them going, what about the Starbucks cup? What about the stadium cup? Solo cup's okay, and that's it. We did it for an hour, and then they had to schedule for me to come back for another hour and a half presentation to go over all the rest of the things that I've talked to you about tonight. So, cups, no. Just no. That's all there is to it. Smalls and bigs, we already talked about. If it's smaller than a business card or bigger than a jug, don't put it in your single stream recycling. All right, so now that like you're a little disappointed, wah, wah, all that stuff I was putting in my bin, it's not recyclable, oh how terrible. I'm gonna try to give you some hope. So we talked about extended producer responsibility like with the Carton Council. You're gonna see a lot more of this in this country over the next decade. It is high time that the people who are making this stuff take responsibility for this stuff. How sad is it that the consumer has to figure out what to do? It's not right. Smaller countries, okay, over in Europe, hit up against the limits of their landfills much quicker than we did. And so already extended producer responsibility is kicked in. You go to the Best Buy, you buy something, it's encased in that plastic hard thing that you have to cut whatever you just bought out of. You know what I'm talking about? They take that thing right off there, they put that plastic in a bin, and they get shipped back to the producer of that plastic packaging, and then they create more plastic packaging out of it. You're gonna see more and more of this, and you're gonna see it if you tell the producers that you want them to take responsibility. So again, how did recycling happen in this country? It happened with citizens. It happened with people saying this isn't good. I think that we need to be better stewards. I don't like the way this is going. Let industry know this is something, it's a value, it's important to you, and then you want them to be packaging their stuff responsibly. And if they're going to package it in stuff that we can't recycle curbside, then perhaps they might want to think about taking it back and then making it into something else, okay? Domestic markets, awesome. So all the stuff that went down with China, okay, we haven't actually given 3 sentences to this, so I will. What happened with China? Here it is, real quick. China was taking a whole lot of what we were calling mixed plastics. So anything that wasn't a plastic bottle, tub, jug, or jar, we were shipping off to China, right? Not just here, all over the world. They were taking it from all over the world. What happened? China realized we can't keep up. There's too much plastic out there. We don't know, we're incinerating it. Some of it's ending up in the landfill. Actually, that whole new tanker full of mixed plastics just came in. We're gonna send it back out into the ocean, or we're just gonna have them dump it. That's what happened. We didn't know. We just thought they were buying it and getting rid of it responsibly and recycling it. That's not what was actually occurring. So about 5 years ago, China said we can't take all of the world's plastic anymore. In 5 years, we're gonna stop taking it. We're going to do a thing where we slowly wean you off of us, and you're going to have to find your own markets for this stuff or just stop producing it. The world didn't listen. We all just waited until the last second, which was about 1.5 years ago. And then they said, right, so like we said, we're not taking your plastic anymore. Also, did you notice China's now deciding that they're moving away entirely from single-use plastics? They just made this decision. Guess why? Because they were taking it home for the whole world, and they saw the environmental impact of that, and it was horrific. It was really bad. So now their public is like, we're not doing this here anymore. Not only are we not taking the world's, we're not going to produce it in our own country. Okay? So what happened with China? They said no. Now there's no place for all that plastic to go, which is kind of awesome because it's making us all realize, hey, wait a second. That was never really recyclable to begin with. Maybe we should stop buying it. Maybe we should stop making it. And for the stuff like plastic bottles, tubs, jugs, and jars, glass jars and bottles, metal cans, paper and cardboard, perhaps we shouldn't send it overseas. Maybe we should keep it in this country and do our recycling here. Maybe we should create some more American jobs. Guess what? All of that is happening. So the whole crisis with recycling is dead, and this is terrible, and it's all over, and everything you were sending there wasn't actually being recycled. Don't worry about it. This is a huge correction that should have happened a long time ago. It's happening now, and it's being dealt with. We're figuring it out, and it's going okay, is what I'm here to say. We do have paper mills opening up. Will there ever be a solution for all those other mixed plastics, the low-grade ones that I'm talking about that aren't plastic bottles, tubs, jugs, and jars? The answer is no. Those plastics cannot be recycled. There's no way for them to be recycled. They can only go to the landfill or be incinerated. So we just have to stop making them. We have to stop buying them. Unified messaging is coming. So everything that I've talked about here tonight, the Recycle Right North Carolina campaign has spread. South Carolina picked it up. There are 4 other states in the southeast who are picking it up. I know of several states out west who are saying we're about to move this direction. The Northeast Recycling Coalition is having me come up and speak to them in a couple of months so I can share what we did here so that they can start doing it. Okay, so unified messaging, everything we've talked about here tonight, so that you don't have to be confused anymore about what goes in the bin, is the name of the game. Just because we're not a standardized industry doesn't mean that we can't talk to the public who wants to know what they can and can't recycle, right? We have to do it now, not just as like a community here in Cary or the state of North Carolina, but as a nation and really as a world. It's really important that people know what they can and can't recycle so that they can make better consumer choices. Food waste, compost, we already talked about that. It's coming, get ready, do it in your backyard, talk to your local government, make it happen curbside. High time, we can do it. Waste reduction goals, plans, and bans. You see a lot of this happening in Cary right now. So you see communities forming environmental action groups and then working with the municipality or the county to decide how they're going to handle their waste in a more efficient and more sustainable manner. You're going to see a lot more of that coming. And then, of course, I've been really driving this home tonight, citizen awareness and activism, all-time high right now. Look, when I had my first panic attack when I was 9 years old in that mall, when I was 15, 16 years old and doing that recycling program at Grimsley, at Greensboro, at my high school in Greensboro, North Carolina, when I was 25 and working at a domestic violence shelter and receiving huge amounts of incoming donations and then having a whole lot of stuff left over and not knowing where it was supposed to go. When I was working at EcoCycle in Boulder, talking to corporations about how they could handle their waste stream, I never thought this moment would come. It never occurred to me that there would be Facebook groups of people trying to figure out what they could and couldn't put in the bin. It didn't occur to me that an entire state would have a position for someone like me who just learned in the trenches because I had a panic attack when I was 9 years old in a mall. Like, there's an amazing thing happening in this country and in this world right now where we are actually coming to grips with the tremendous amount of waste that we're producing and consuming. And we're starting to understand we've got to do something about the gyres that are in the ocean, that are in all of our oceans, okay? That you guys wanted me to come talk tonight, that we're all talking to each other, that we're talking to the other citizen activist groups, that we're spreading this information. Huge difference in just 5 years' time, things that I never thought would occur, okay? So I want you to know that it's getting easier and that I am way more hopeful than I've ever been. I'm going to finish up, and then we're going to take a lot more questions, I can tell. So this is all about Recycle Right, which we've already talked about quite a bit tonight. Statewide anti-contamination campaign, educating the public. We made it for local governments to implement. Over 250 of our local governments in the state did it, which is over half of the local governments that have recycling programs. We thought maybe 50 local governments would want to participate. So it was a stunning amount of support. You can find our resources on our website and also on our Facebook page. You'll have to find it as Recycle More NC. We're rebranding right now to be Recycle Right NC. The campaign was our first launch into that. Public liked it. We're going to keep going with that. Government takes a while to make change, but we're on our way. So yeah, Recycle More NC is the website and also the Facebook page. We have all these materials. I've got them all up here for you to check out tonight. So if you need any handouts, we've got them. You can get talking points for talking to your elected officials, to the press, anything that you need. And then here's our top 10 key takeaways. So there's only 4 categories of accepted materials, and out of those 4 categories, only 9 things are actually recyclable. The 4 categories are plastic, metal, paper, and glass. The 9 items are plastic bottles, tubs, jugs, and jars, paper and cardboard, glass jars and bottles, and metal cans. When in doubt, throw it out is number 2. Number 3 is you're the first sorter, so help Jenny and Jimmy and all the people that are on the line. You know how to sort now, and if you do it right, their lives are going to be easier. Contamination hurts people, it hurts the process, and it hurts prices. That's why things are contaminants. If you can reduce your single use and make better consumer decisions, it's going to go way further than recycling. I'm going to say this, I haven't talked about it tonight. I don't want anybody obsessing anymore about recycling. I want you to recycle the 9 items that I said reliably. I want you to put the rest of it in the trash can or make a different consumer choice. And then I want you to spend your time educating girls, reducing your car use, reducing your consumption, reducing your meat intake, reducing your food waste, reducing what you're actually recycling by making better consumer choices. These are the things that Project Drawdown tells us that we should be doing that are going to make the biggest impact, and that's where your energy should go. Recycling is important. It's part of an overall strategy, but like you really want to make some good use of your time, go tutor women. Go tutor girls. Educating women is proven to be one of the most impactful things that we can do to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and climate change, okay? So I'm not just making these things up. There's data to back this up, and check out Project Drawdown. Number 7, the recycling symbol cannot tell you if that thing is actually recyclable. Ignore it, move on, remember this talk, okay? Number 8, recycle more of the right stuff, and then work on putting less in your recycling bin. Like really look at it. What are the decisions that I'm making here? Do I really need these clamshells, or can I actually buy the spinach not in the clamshell, right? I'll be honest with you. I've been in this business for a long time. I've been recycling for a long time. I still have disposable cups in my back seat. I still get handed water bottles when I go to events. Stuff happens, right? But I try to make a better choice 1 out of every 2 times. That's what I personally try to do. So anytime that you have the opportunity to make a better choice, do it. And then you're reducing your waste by 50% just by making a better choice 1 out of every 2 times, okay? MRFs are built to sort recyclables, not trash. We haven't really talked about this, but they're built to sort your stuff into bales, right? The good recyclables. It's not meant to sort out the trash from the recycling. That's not how the system's set up. It's not how the machines work. And then number 10 is know your no's. And here they are. No bagged recyclables, no food waste, no plastic wrap or plastic bags, no hazardous or medical waste, no paper towels or tissue like my mother-in-law, no textiles, which I could just talk about that all day long because I used to run thrift stores. So if you want to know about like secondhand textile stuff, come talk to me. Before China, the first time that we had a big drop in the recycling markets was actually the textile markets. It happened in 2012. I could talk about that all day long. So yeah, don't put your textiles in recycling, no scrap metal, no tanglers. And that's it. I'm done talking, and I'm sick of my voice.